Welcome to Mr. Robots channel for daily stories. How did your high school crush end up in life? My high school crush was a lovely young lady named Nicole. I met her my sophomore year and we became fast friends. We talked on the phone every single day after school. We flirted. We hung out at school. She would occasionally come hang out with me at my brother's apartment after school or on weekends. I was totally in love. The problem was that we were never single at the same time. If she was single, I had a girlfriend. If I was single, she had a boyfriend, usually one of my friends. Eventually I married one of my girlfriends, and we fell out of touch. My marriage lasted less than a year, and I thought that maybe now was the time to try to make things work. I had moved in with another old friend from high school. I was 20 at the time, and he gave me the bad news that she was now married, and married to an abusive jerk at that. Eventually my sister convinced me to come live with her and her first husband, and in the process mentioned that my high school crush had just gotten divorced. We worked out a plan, and she called Nicole and asked her if she wanted to come visit her for a few days. They had become friends in band together in school. Nicole had no idea I was there. We hadn't spoken in a couple of years. When my sister pulled up at Nicole's house to pick her up, she was shocked to see me step out from the passenger side of the truck. She ran up and gave me a huge hug, and the world felt right. We spent the next few days together, but eventually she had to go back home. We talked a lot that last night, and she confessed that she was still dealing with the trauma of the abusive husband she had just left, and said that even though she wanted us to be together, she didn't want to start a relationship while she was still dealing with all of that. She was worried that she would subconsciously hold what he did to her against me, and she didn't want to take it out on me. She asked me to wait for her to be ready, and I said I would. I understood. I went away to school for a while, but when I came back to visit my sister, Nicole came over to see me. We hung out for a few hours when she suddenly popped up and said she needed to go. She wanted to go buy some weed from someone, and she didn't want to get there till late at night and wake him up. I knew she only knew one dealer, but I still asked her who she was planning to buy from. She admitted that it was her ex-husband. She had been going back to see him more and more frequently to get high, and he was trying to get her to come back to him. I got angry. We were standing outside by her car, and I was holding half a bottle of beer. Something dawned on me then, and I asked her how she was paying for the weed. She wouldn't look me in the eye. I got really angry, and I threw the bottle, smashing it against the wall of the house. She had never seen me truly angry before, at least not at her, and she flinched. That made me even angrier. Now let me clarify something here. I wasn't angry because she was sleeping with her ex. It was her right to do whatever she wanted with whoever she wanted. I didn't own her, and I didn't think I did. I was angry at her because I had seen what he did to her. I had seen the migraines she got from the concussion he gave her, seen the scar from the stitches she got after he broke her jaw. I had seen all of the things this man had done to her, and I was furious that she was willing to put herself back in a situation where he could do it again, and even more furious at the fact that I knew there was nothing I could do to stop her, to protect her. Sure, I could hurt him, I could scare the piss out of him if I wanted to, but if she still kept going back to him, then all that would do was make it even worse on her once he forgot the fear. The only thing I could do to actually protect her would be to kill him, but if she was going to make the choice to go back to him, then why should I ruin the rest of my life to stop her? I was also angry that she thought, in my moment of rage, that I would ever physically hurt her. She had known me for 6 years by this point, not a long time now, but at the time it was almost a third of our lives. She knew that I would never strike a woman, that I would never do anything to hurt a woman, and especially not her. But in that moment she looked at me and saw him, and that also made me angry. I took a step back away from her, put some distance between us, and said as calmly as I could, "If you go over there tonight, don't bother ever coming back over here." Then I turned around and walked inside. I left the door open, an invitation to come back in if she wanted to. About 5 minutes went by, and then I heard her car door open and close, heard her engine start, heard her drive away. I never saw Nicole again after that night, but I did speak to her again twice after that. About a year later I was at my brother's apartment when she called him. He had maintained his friendship with her even though I hadn't, and she called to check up on him from time to time. My brother had leukemia. I answered the phone when she called, and she was so happy to hear my voice. She told me she had moved to Florida and was working at a bar, and she missed me terribly, and she wished she could see me again. We spoke for a couple of minutes, then I handed the phone to my brother and took a walk. I found out from him later that working at a bar actually meant she was dancing in a strip club. She had gotten back together with her ex, and they moved to Florida together. He was dealing, and she was dancing. Apparently he got her hooked on a few other drugs and took off with some other dancer, so she was living down there and dancing to pay her rent and her habit. It was sad. The last time I spoke to her was 10 years later. Out of the blue one day I decided I wanted to talk to my old friend. I used an online people finder service to get her number, and I called and left a message on her voicemail. She called me back, and we talked for about 20 minutes. It was so depressing. She was completely burnt out. She told me she was living on disability, and she had some Indian dude that took care of her. I think he was her dealer. She was so out of it that she forgot who she was talking to 3 times during our conversation. At one point she realized she needed to tell me that her friend Robin had died 6 years earlier. I had to remind her that Robin was my brother, and she only knew him because of me. She kept apologizing for being so forgetful, and I assured her it was okay. It wasn't. When I hung up the phone I knew I would never speak to her again. I still held out hope that she would turn her life around, and a few years later I did a Google search on her name to see if I could find any social media accounts for her. All I found were her mugshots. She had been arrested 7 times over 2 years for various drug charges. Her pictures were so disturbing. She was a year younger than me, but looked 20 years older. She looked nothing like the beautiful, vibrant girl I fell in love with in high school. 2 months ago I went back to my hometown to attend the retirement concert for my godmother, who was retiring after 25 years as the choral director for my hometown high school and middle school. I was meeting a group of former classmates, and we were all going to surprise her at the end of the concert. One of the people in our group was Nicole's older sister. I approached her before the concert and asked her how Nicole was doing. She let me know that Nicole had passed away 3 years ago. It isn't surprising that she's gone. That was the lifestyle she chose. Nicole was the only girl in my history that I ever played the what could have been game with though. I'll never know how things might have turned out if we had just done things a little differently. I wouldn't change anything. If I had ended up with her I never would have met my fiancé, and even though I lost her last year I still wouldn't trade the 7 years we had together for anything. Still, I can't help but wonder how different would our lives have turned out if we had made a serious go at it. Edit. A couple have people have asked why I shared her pictures, and it's a fair question. I debated for a bit about whether it was appropriate before I finally decided to include them. I wanted to illustrate the change that she went through, to show how much her choices affected her. I know from talking to her that last time that she regretted those choices, although she couldn't stop making them. I also know that she would have been okay with me sharing her pictures. She was always very open about who she was, and I believe she would be happy knowing that people had heard her story, as tragic as it is. Also, a few people have asked why I didn't do more to prevent her from going back to her ex or trying to break her addiction. The problem is that it wasn't the drugs that she was addicted to, it was the control that her ex had over her. He made her believe that she was his property, and in the end I couldn't get through to her that the only person she belonged to was herself. I had provided her with a safety net for too long, and I feel like all that did was enable the problem, because she always knew that if it got too bad she could fall back on me. I thought that by removing the safety net she would finally realize that she needed to get out. I was wrong, but that's hindsight. Either way, I couldn't force her to make different choices. All I could do was show her that there were alternatives and then leave her to live her life. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read and comment. If you go ever there tonight, don't bother ever coming back over here. Then I turned around and walked inside. I left the door open, an invitation to come back in if she wanted to. She drove away. What if she came inside? What if? What ifs? That particular line struck the most out of the whole story. She had a choice to come in, yet she didn't. She chose her destiny. She took the road that tarnished her self-respect, mind, body and soul. The choice was hers. Nobody is accountable for screwing up her life. Would you have been writing now about being married to your high school crush if she had decided to come in? Maybe. We chose our own destiny. All the choices that we make, good or bad, are the outcome of what we sow. We reap what we sow. Sometimes, shit happens, things go awfully bad. She knew that she couldn't go back, rewind the phase, and erase her mistakes. Yet deep down, I'm sure that she would have wondered the same as we all do too. What if she had chosen to come inside that day you invited her? That one day we all know the story would have been written so differently than this. Her story. And probably yours too. Nonetheless, thank you for sharing this interesting point. And she had contemplated her decision for 5 minutes before deciding to leave. I'm fascinated with tiny moments that in retrospect, you recognize as incredibly significant and potentially life-altering. All in one throwaway decision. That's why I would never go back to an ex. If she had turned around and went back into the house, she would have left him the next day, week, or month. That's what people like that do. She was an alcoholic, drug addict, and abuse victim. They quit their addiction every day, seriously quit it. They tell themselves, today is the first day of the rest of my life, and they really mean it. Then that night, the next day, or the next week, they go right back. They can't help it. The fear of changing is greater than the pain of staying where you are. Yes, it's always that one day or one decision. It's like a fork in the road of point of no return. I have a friend who also had gone through hell at a startup, and one decision to make. Stay with the company and fight the battle for company shares at the startup, or just leave without shares, which he almost got tricked to. He chose the former, and after getting the shares and sold it, he started his own company with the money, and the rest is history. He is pretty rich right now. Chris, first of all, thank you for sharing this. It's never easy to review these kinds of situations. It almost always hurts. Had a similar situation myself, with the high school crush, and you play a lot of what if when you hear this, or that bit of news. The best thing to remember, and you know this I'm sure, is that you more than likely couldn't have done anything. It's just the way it all works out sometimes. Like the saying goes, life is what happens when we are making plans. Hi Chris. Thanks for sharing this. I just wanted you to know that Nichol's flinching the time you got angry had little to do with you. It was a learned response from her unhealthy relationship with a violent man. Women who have been physically abused often have PTSD, and a mere hand clap or glass breaking can cause a flinch or much more. I just wanted to write that real quick, so you wouldn't have to believe she thought you could be violent. I'm sure she knew she was safe around you. Thanks again for taking the time to share your story with us. It was a valuable and moving read. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.